Hey, welcome everybody. We're really delighted to meet with you here to introduce to you the Career Development Centre here at the Said Business School in Oxford. A warm welcome wherever you are this afternoon. As we jump into this webinar, there will be relevant links dropped into the chat, so please do keep an eye on the chat function. Importantly, Hannah will also be dropping a link to the portal, which will be the main conduit of communication that will be sent out to you on a weekly basis from us and from the MBA program team. So kind of look out for the links as we go through this webinar this afternoon. So a warm welcome to all of you here. And we very much look forward to you joining us in Oxford. So with me this afternoon, I have three of my colleagues. Dan Kiernan is going to be leading part of the webinar. Dan heads up our global industries team and is also our impact expert as well. We also have Laura Sanchez and Hannah Evans, who are in our operations team. So we'll kick off this afternoon by jumping straight into the first slide and tell you what we're going to be talking through with you this afternoon. You could jump on. Thank you very much, Dan. So we wanted to take you through kind of our role as a team within the school. We're a big team. There's 25 of us who will be supporting you in the next 12 months and beyond. Our purpose is to support your journey and support your thinking. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. We're also going to talk about the proposition, kind of what we're offering you, what you can expect from us, and how we want you to engage with us during this time so that you maximize the opportunities in front of you, not just the opportunities with our team, but the opportunities that align with joining Oxford and the bigger university and the network that is now open to you. And then the final part of our webinar is getting you to think about what's most important for you in the short term over the next 2 or 3 months before you join the programme. So if we move on to the next slide. A key element of what we do as a team, we're made up of a big coaching fraternity within the Career Development Centre. And coaching is very much about empowering people to articulate and own their own journey. So I suspect many of you in the virtual room today might not be quite sure which direction you're going in, but your purpose is very much to find out and make decisions that are resonate for you and they're yours alone. So we want to encourage you to do that, to make decisions and build your networks, to build your confidence and the skills that enable you to be a really successful career developer, not just now and in the next 12 months, but over the next decades. So as we move on to the next slide, we're going to take you through our proposition really, how the team is set up, the resources we offer that you can tap into, and the key timelines that are going to be quite important for you to structure your thinking and your actions around. And also going to pose some questions to get you thinking about where you are right now. So there are kind of 4 key building blocks that the Career Development Centre are founded on really. So career decision making, as I said, the team is made up of a lot of coaches. So encouraging your thinking. You're thinking about what's next. You're thinking about how you want to work in the future, what's relevant in terms of your past, present and future, helping you to join the dots up in terms of thinking about where you've been and where you want to be going. The second part is the Careers Toolkit. This is a really practical element that we hope, again, that you'll take on with you when you leave Oxford. So this is about building and writing a really good CV, how to write impactful cover letters, your elevator pitch that will accompany you through, that will change and shift over the next few years, that will be a very important part of what people remember about you. And then thinking about interview techniques and the different types of interviews that you will be asked to engage with. Our team, as you'll see shortly, is set up in different sectors. So we offer industry knowledge, what happens in different sectors, how they work, how they operate, how they recruit, and how you need to work towards that. Also, the latest kind of who is recruiting where and how, because there's a great deal about strategy in terms of where you might want to be applying to. And then finally and importantly, we create interactions with employers. These may take all sorts of forms. They may be virtual and they may be in person. So here are I'd say our resident experts. Our team is formed of 4 different sectors. So Dan, who I've introduced you to, heads up the global industry sector. Effectively, this is kind of one of the biggest sectors that includes everything that is not tech, e-commerce, consulting and finance, and obviously includes impact. Caroline Gell heads up our tech and e-commerce team. James Nugent heads up our consulting team. And John Madrick heads up our finance team. Just to note, right at the end of this webinar, there will be QR codes that link to the sector events that are happening early next week. So those will give you a great opportunity to find out a little bit more about what's happening in each sector and the key markers. The rest of the senior team consists of me and of Maria Dooley, who heads up our executive careers team. This team works with our executive MBA students, but also our alumni. So that will include you in the short and long term. Jane Hayward heads up our student talent development programs and also our operations. So as I've mentioned already, coaching is the cornerstone of what we offer. And we offer you unlimited access to qualified coaches to talk about your career journey. And I think an important part of this is it's relevant whether you know or you don't know where you want to go. A while ago, someone said to me, when I was really frustrated with not knowing the answer to something, they pointed out kind of quite an obvious thing, which is how on earth can you move forwards and know something without being in the position of first not knowing? So we recognize it might be uncomfortable not knowing, but we also offer the opportunity to talk and be strategic about how you get into a position of knowing what you might want to do. So I think as we move on to the next slide, we offer a whole range of different types of events, from employer interactions to panels, to discussions and workshops. Some of those workshops will be very practical around understanding your impact, your elevator pitch around LinkedIn. So we offer a great number of different events as you come and join us in Oxford in September and October. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Dan, who's going to talk you through the great number of digital resources that are available to you right now, most of them. Dan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Joy. Hi, everyone. Nice to have you all here with us. I'm just going to quickly run through some, but not all, of the digital resources we offer. These are the most important ones, and Oscar might be the most important one of all. You've probably already been on Oscar and you've started to get familiar with it. This is where you're going to book one-to-one appointments for that coaching that Joy was talking about. It's where you find and book yourself onto events. It's also where we have our jobs board. So we've got a curated jobs board from employers and job opportunities where we know that they're interested in hiring MBAs and hiring MBAs from Saïd Business School. So it's not a comprehensive jobs board. You'll still be using other jobs boards and other ways of sourcing opportunities, but it's a very important one because it is our curated jobs board, as I say. Canvas is our digital learning environment. You'll get very familiar with it because you'll use it for some of your program content and some of the other co-curricular activities. But we have a couple of modules on there about the careers toolkit and career decision making, some of the things Joy was talking about earlier. I'd strongly encourage you to work through that content during the summer before you arrive, because once you get here on the MBA, I'm sure you've heard already, you're going to be really, really busy. So the more advanced your career thinking is by the time you land with us, the better. And if you've worked through that content, that's going to really help you advance that thinking, both in terms of thinking through what you want and making some decisions and sharpening up that toolkit that Joy was talking about. You probably know advice and mentoring is really important in career development. So alongside having access to qualified coaches, the first-hand platform will give you a chance to connect with industry experts where you can get advice and mentoring from them as well. I strongly encourage you to use that. WorkMaze is a great platform for exploring the big MBA recruitment programs, the big leadership development programs for LDPs, and MBA Exchange is a very similar resource. It does a really good comprehensive job of pulling together all of those leadership development programs at the big organizations. Now, they won't be for everyone, but if that is the area that you're interested in or something that you're exploring, then that is your best resource to keep on top of deadlines and which programs are opening and when, and what kind of people they're looking for and what regions they're working in. So do take a look at that. In terms of our co-curricular programs that we offer, you'll get termly careers boot camps. So they will be mostly focused on the careers toolkit. So you can see how the picture builds up here, actually. You have access to things online, so you can work asynchronously in your own time. You can come along to these boot camps, these in-person workshops, and practice those skills and sharpen those things up in conjunction with a facilitator and learning from each other. And then you have access to the one-to-one coaching for more individual input as well. So that's how the whole picture builds up. So we have the termly careers boot camps for thinking about the toolkit. Finance Lab, I'm sure you'll all have heard of this, based on financial modeling. Impact Finance Lab does the same thing for impact investing. There's an asset management masterclass you can get involved in. Consulting development program will be opening fairly soon. Really important for case preparation. If you're interested in applying for consulting, obviously they have a very specific selection process. So anything you can do to prepare for that is important. Product management has been a big area for MBAs over the last few years. So we run the product management roadmap to help prepare people for that career path. And impact intros, that's focused on impact careers and giving you opportunities to hear from and network with panels of practitioners in different impact career areas. And then supply chain futures is a new one. This is another big area that's coming under a lot of attention at the moment after all of the disruption we had in the pandemic. So we've got a program that looks about this increasingly important function. We also have the experienced hire series. So I'll say a little bit more about the difference between experienced hire and structured hire when I talk you through the time frame. But again, this is another co-curricular program we run to help you succeed. And data-driven decision-making, a huge part of almost any business now. So that is another opportunity that is run by the Career Development Centre. And finally, we have the Preparing for Leadership series. So this is the talent development program, giving you lots of opportunities to develop some of those soft skills and interpersonal skills and other skills that are going to be really important for you in the workplace. And through that program, you get access to executive coaching as well. So again, you can start to see how the picture builds up. You have career coaching from people like me and my colleagues in the Career Development Centre. You can use the first-hand platform to access advice and mentoring and those kind of relationships. And then you can get executive coaching through this MBA leadership coaching program. So you can see how there's this whole network and this ecosystem of support for. And finally, we have our panel of industry advisors. So we can't be experts in every single job function, every single job role across all of the industries that we see MBAs going into. So we've got a panel of industry advisors who are practitioners and experienced people in different career areas. We draw on them for support ourselves. You know, we rely on them to tell us what's happening in the market. And we can also broker connections between you and them. So you might use them for a mock interview, or you might use them to learn more about a particular industry function. So we draw on their support a lot. In terms of the time frame, officially it's a 12-month program, isn't it? But actually we like to think of it as a 25-month program. So if you look right down there in the bottom left, that's where we are right now between June and August, where we've got this pre-arrival program on Canvas, and we do these kinds of webinars. And as I said earlier, the more you can do earlier, the better, because you land better prepared when the program starts. In terms of employer activity, from November to January, roughly, this is an approximation, the dates shift around a little bit every year, but that's when we see a lot of structured hiring from employers. So structured hiring is the big employers like consultants and investment banks, where they know they're going to hire lots of MBAs every year. So they hire them early in their cycle, and they hire them in cohorts that are going to start the following year, typically in September. So that's structured hiring. It's very popular. It's very aspirational for MBAs. Not everyone is successful. You know, there's only a limited number of seats through the structured hiring processes, but it's always a big part of the early months in the MBA career program. And from March to May, you might find that you're applying for internships if that's something that you want to do for the summer. So a lot of the employer activity and a lot of your activity approaching employers will be focused around internships in that period. And then from April onwards, you'll be thinking about experienced hiring. So the experienced hire market is needs-based hiring, where an employer has a vacancy to fill that has arisen through employee turnover, people have left, or through the growth of a business. Because it's needs-based hiring, a hiring manager typically wouldn't wait more than 3 or 4 months to fill a vacancy. So there would be no point in you applying for jobs any earlier than April, because you won't be available for full-time work from until September onwards. So that's how the experienced hiring market works, and why we say it's from April onwards. It doesn't mean you're doing nothing between now and April, because that's when you'll be doing a lot of networking activity, building your connections and relationships with the organizations and in the job functions where you want to work, because it's through those connections and through the knowledge that you acquire through that activity that you put yourself in the best possible place for success in the experienced hiring market. From July to August, if you do choose to do an internship, that's probably when you'll be doing it. And then after graduation, that's actually when most MBAs find their jobs. So, you know, don't panic if you haven't got a job by May or June or something like that. That's actually very typical. And here's how our program of support maps onto that. So we're already in that pre-arrival period that I've mentioned. But from October to August, you'll have all of that activity that Joy was talking about earlier. And then after the program ends, you still have access to our support. So between September and March, we have what we call the Boost program. It's a specific program that you can engage in to help people who are job seeking in that period. But even beyond that, you still have access to the career service. So we give ongoing support to our alumni. So whether that is about advancing in your career, advancing in your current job, looking for promotions, whether it's about settling into that job and performing at your best, or maybe it's about changing job and making further career transitions in the future, you have ongoing access to the support of the career service. So on that basis, we're now going to jump into a quick Mentimeter poll. So if you can take a scan of that QR code or go to menti.com, we're going to ask you, which sector do you want to go into post-MBA? So this is just a way for us to understand what people are thinking and where the cohort's at. And I think my colleague Hannah is going to take over control now and switch over to the Mentimeter. So over to you, Hannah, to make the switch. Okay, oh, the results are coming fast. Well done, guys. I like to see quick responses. So I'll give it a few moments to let people settle. Oh, Hannah's given you a hurry up there. You've got about 26 seconds left to make a response.
But it's quite interesting actually, Dan, because this morning the global industries was lower. I think it's because you're in the room, you see.
People are just trying to make me feel good, aren't they? They just want to make me feel like I'm wanted.
Well, that's very interesting.
Okay, so we've got 4 more seconds to the voting closes. Thank you everyone for participating. It's interesting, isn't it, just to see how the cohort is going to shape up, or at least these people we've got here today. So that is actually pretty typical. That split between consulting and finance, they're normally pretty equal for what we see. That's a little higher than we usually see for global industry, as Joy has pointed out. So that's quite satisfying for me. And then, yeah, we always have a lot of people interested in tech, a smaller number interested in impact, and a smaller number again interested in entrepreneurship. And, you know, as Joy said earlier, if you're undecided, you know, that's not a problem. Part of our job is to help you go through that career exploration and help you make some decisions and decide exactly where you want to land. Okay, thank you very much, Hannah. I'm going to jump back in and take control again once more and move the slide on. But I think, Joy, you're going to talk to this slide now, aren't you?
Yeah, sure. So kind of from our perspective, we, as the material that we've shared with you so far, we talk a lot about people being in 3 different spaces. So we talk about people being explorers, where you've got lots of ideas. You may have come from a very specific background or industry, but you're not quite sure where you want to be next. And the second area that actually a lot of students are in is transitioning. So you've got a certain experience and you're using the MBA, you've made a decision to invest in your MBA as a platform to make this change and make this move. And it could be a transition of geography, it could be a transition of sector, and it could be a transition of role. It could be all 3. Our accelerators are typically seeking to stay on the same pathway, and that could include you if you're a sponsored student, and seeing the MBA as an accelerator on to the next stage, perhaps broadening out your kind of career thinking. So just to give you a bit of feedback for those of you, those 210 of you who have already activated their Oscar profile, we know that 24 of you are accelerating, 22 of you are exploring, 23 of you are transitioning. Interestingly, 15 of you are exploring and accelerating, 38 of you are exploring and transitioning, and 16 of you are transitioning and accelerating. And interestingly, 35 of you are looking at all 3 tracks simultaneously, which is fine. So thank you very much. We'll just move on to the next slide. So as you engage with one or all 3 of those tracks, you'll find that you're often pivoting around three different activities or states, we'd like to say. One is reflecting, one is thinking about where you are currently and where you want to be. That can lead you to deciding you need to find out more about a specific area, sector, or geography, for example. And that in turn, once you've kind of done your research and discover what you need to discover, that can lead you into the activate phase, which means getting your CV shaped up, your LinkedIn profile, so that it's coherent with what you're aspiring to do. So any prospective recruiter can look at your profile and understand the thread of where you've been and where you want to go. So as we move into the next slide, these are the areas that, when it comes to the activation phase, are particularly important. And these are the areas that we aim to cover through our career toolkit. So CVs and cover letters, your qualifications and grades, the number of applications you might need to make, the interview techniques that you will need to acquire and feel comfortable and confident with, your ability to network and form relationships, particularly informational networking, and the ability to leverage your knowledge and your experience with whatever comes next. So as we move on to the next slide, part of how we work with you in the next 12 months and beyond is we have some quite specific asks that we make of you to make them to ensure that you get the most out of us. So one is engagement. Start early, take time. In a moment, Dan is going to talk about some of our students and their particular stories, but one student stands out called Michael, who really got ahead of the game. He was really clear about where he wanted to be in strategy consulting. And so he showed up for everything, which is really positive. Plan on spending 4 to 5 hours a week. That could mean 4 to 5 hours a week networking, talking to the right people, growing your network, and putting in time on your CV. Don't leave it all to the end of your year. With events, show up on time, stay to the end. These might seem obvious things, but the people that come and take part in our panels, whether they're employers or alumni, they notice people. So ask questions, ask informed questions and follow up on them. Put your camera on. Also, in terms of owning this process, understand the hiring times that are relevant to what you want to do. Build the relationships that are relevant to what you want to do and hold yourself to account. So as we move on to the next slide, Dan is going to talk us through some of the very recent students, current students, in fact, that we've worked with. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Joy. Yeah, so I won't talk through all of them, but I wanted to pick out some success stories to give a sense of the breadth of experiences that people have here. So Joy has already mentioned Michael, who I didn't know well, but he really impressed me when I did speak to him, because as Joy said, he knew exactly what he wanted. He was interested in working for a top-tier consultancy. He made some decisions early. He was very well organized and he was very committed to the process. He understood right away, just how tough that consulting selection process is. My personal memory of him is I'm one of life's early risers. I get to the school really early, about 7:30, 8-ish, and he was always here and he was always well turned out and he was working on something in the coffee room. So, that kind of focus and dedication obviously goes down really well. I'll also pick out Juan, someone who I knew really well and really liked. He was coming from Colombia. He'd worked in finance, but he wanted to transition to impact investment and he wanted to stay in the UK. He had a really challenging journey. He didn't land his final job until 12 months after graduating the MBA. So in that interim period, he'd been doing some internships, he'd been doing some jobs that he wasn't quite as keen on, but he was still doing all the right things. He was networking and he was making applications, and it was 12 months later, he landed a job in impact investment at Big Society Capital. It was actually an organization he'd been targeting right from the start, and it was the 4th time he'd applied and he was successful. So he was a wonderful case study in being persistent and staying positive. Kanya was another really interesting student that I worked with. So she worked for Old Mutual in South Africa. She came to the MBA and she did a lot of the exploration that Joy has been talking about, trying out different things, thinking about different career paths. So, her intention had been to make a career transition. And then in the end, she actually went back to Old Mutual in South Africa, but in a different position, doing more of the kinds of work that she wanted to do and at a higher level. So she ended up being kind of an accelerator without that being her original intention. And Ishak is now an entrepreneur. So he's got a clean energy startup in Nigeria. We helped him a little bit. So when we first met him, he was debating, should I have a corporate career or should I pursue this entrepreneurship idea? And so this is really about the value of coaching that Joy was talking about. We helped him think through that decision, consider all of his options and eventually come to this decision that he's going to pursue entrepreneurship. From that point onwards, he wasn't in our hands. He was in the hands of the Entrepreneurship Centre, who help people that want to have their own ventures. But it was really good fun and really interesting to be involved with him in that decision-making process. So, and put that one in there just to highlight that we can help with some of the decision-making. It's not just CV polish and interview preparation and these sorts of things. So I'll pause there, and at this point we can go over for any questions people have. So if you've got questions, feel free just to post them in the chat, and Joy and I will take them one at a time.
Yeah, thank you very much for those people who've already asked questions. We really appreciate that. There have been various questions asking about who should you talk to, and if you get on to OSCAR, it will tell you which teams they sit in, whether they sit in finance or global industries or consulting or in tech, so that we make sure that you're talking to the right person. And actually, whoever you talk to within our team, we will always be keen to direct and curate your conversation to the right people.
Yeah, of course. And you'll get a chance to meet the coaches in the welcome webinars for each sector that Joy has mentioned. And of course, we'll be doing introductions in person when you arrive for the MBA. So there's plenty of opportunity to get to know us and get to know who the right people are to speak with.
Yeah. And if you want to find out more about the individual sector programmes, you can go into that by looking at the Understand Your Industry option on the portal. So that will give you a little bit more detail about the programmes that Dan outlined earlier on.
Yeah, I've had one question come to me directly. So I won't name the person, maybe perhaps they want to remain anonymous, but it's quite a good question. It says a little bit about their background, and then says, should they accelerate or should they try and make a kind of career pivot? So that's the kind of coaching question that you could come to us, and just as I was describing with Ishak, we would help you work through your thinking on that. The one thing I would say here is the bigger the jump you're making, the bigger the pivot you're making, the harder it is to achieve. So that might be one of the things that you'd like to consider. If you're changing job function, industry, and location all at once, that's a big challenge. If you're just changing location, that's going to be much easier, and then perhaps you can make the other switches later on in your career journey. So that was quite a good question to pick up on those points.
I'm just picking up on a question here from Amir asking about what the definition of an above average work experience. Well, that's a tricky one. We would say on average, students come to the MBA with 5 years work experience. We also have students here who can at times have 10 years or more experience. So I'd say we were probably thinking around 5 years for an MBA in general. But equally, as you're aware, we run the executive MBA program where people have typically 15 years experience.
Yeah, thank you, Joy. We've got a question. Can you give examples of global industries where SBSNs go to work for? Well, it's more or less everything you can think of. Within the global industry team, we don't really have a concentration of 1 or 2 employers where we see lots of students going. It's a long tail of different employers across different industries where students go. We do see people going a lot into healthcare. We do see people going into the energy sector. We do see a lot of people going into media. But really, whatever sector you can think of, we've probably had students go into it.
Great. And there's another question here from Lee, who asks about if someone has an interest in the real estate industry, who'd be a good resource to bounce ideas off. We'd suggest Ben Leslie in the finance team. He has some good connections and quite a lot of knowledge in that space. So Ben Leslie is a good person, good coach to talk to.
So question around visas. These ones are always challenging. Are foreign students recruited under the student extension visa or given a working visa? So typically now, an employer would take you with your 2-year graduate visa extension. And then obviously, if you're staying with that employer and staying in the UK beyond that, then they would have to sponsor your visa. But it's different for different employers. And it's different for different locations, if you're thinking about visas into a different country. And it can be different on a case-by-case basis. So there's no generic answer to that.
Yeah. A good follow-up question here for Amil asking about the follow-up on the 5 years work experience. So therefore, if people have less than that, would we encourage you to go for structured hiring as opposed to experienced hiring? Not necessarily. Everybody is different. I think it depends where you've been and what you've been doing. So I think it's a very individual journey. So again, come and talk to us directly, because I think, probably three years in a very interesting or unusual industry can make quite a big difference. So come and talk to us.
I've had another one come to me directly. Do we have alumni working in the spirit industry? Off the top of my head, I don't know. We could probably take a look and find out. But you could probably take a look and find out. So one of your best resources on this journey is going to be LinkedIn. Now, I don't know how familiar you guys are with LinkedIn, probably got different levels of experience with it. But if you go onto LinkedIn, put in Said Business School into the search bar and go to our page and then click on the alumni tab. You can then look for all of our alumni. You can do keyword search, or you can filter by industry or filter by organization. So if you've got a particular industry or organization where you want to find alumni to reach out to, then that would be a good tool for it.
Great.
And by the way, Hannah is very well connected with our alumni, and she says, yes, we do. So thank you, Hannah. You filled in the gap there. And we've got another one, do have alumni in the legal industry, legal tech or litigation finance. We've certainly got them in the legal industry. Off the top of my head, I don't know about legal tech or litigation finance. One thing you will have to excuse me for over the course of the next 12 to 18 months is my mental database isn't that great. I haven't got this mental Rolodex of all of the alumni and every organization and job function they fulfill. But through tools like LinkedIn, or through our own networks, hopefully we can help you with those kinds of questions.
And I think it also goes back to Dan's point earlier about tapping into LinkedIn. So it's not just about our other MBAs, it's also about our executive MBAs. And I'm very aware of quite a few that have come in from the legal industry, including litigation finance. So, use LinkedIn well. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and again, Hannah's come in with answers on where we have alumni. Thank you, Hannah. I think I've missed a couple here. Let me just scan back a little bit. Does structured hiring mean students join firms as associates instead of analysts? Typically, yes. If you go through structured hiring as an MBA for the finance sector, it's going in at the associate level, but it can change. So that would be a question that I would put to the finance team on their welcome webinar. Which careers resource would you advise students use for determining which sector to do structured hiring, along with the corresponding desired experience, skills, and recruitment process? That's MBA Exchange. So Yogesh, you want to spend a lot of time on MBA Exchange to find exactly which structured hiring programs and leadership development programs look like they might be the best fit for you.
Dan, I was going to say, could you take the aerospace and space tech sector question?
I think we do have some in space, aerospace, I don't know. As I say, off the top of my head, I can't remember what every alumni does and exactly which organisations and sectors they're in.
I'm happy to pick up the question about how the labour market has been in the UK lately. I think, to be really honest, it depends what area you're looking in. From our perspective, consulting has been quite robust. The area that has been less robust, I would say, is tech. So again, it's all about market intelligence and kind of doing your homework and understanding what is going on in different areas. So recently, hiring has been pretty positive, but we are seeing evidence of the tech industry slowing down in some areas. But again, it's about being strategic about where you're looking and looking at smaller tech firms that are still continuing to innovate. Some of the bigger ones have quite rightly slowed down because they over-recruited during the pandemic. So some of the shifts are quite logical and understandable. But again, do your research and talk to us, because we do a lot of sharing about the state of the market from talking to our own recruiters.
I've had another good one coming to me directly. So it's someone who's a military vet who worked in logistics and operations. If they moved into the supply chain post MBA, would that be a triple jump? Well, it would be kind of a triple jump. I mean, presumably you're calling it a triple jump because you're changing location. You're definitely changing industry from the military to the private sector. You're not quite changing function. You'll have some of the skills that are really important for that function, although applying them in a different context might be a little bit different. So it's a stretch, but I would say someone who was coming with that background would be a reasonably strong candidate for jobs in supply chain. So yeah, I quite like your thinking there, the person who asked me that question.
So I'm just picking up a question from Abhinav. Will coaches also help us in getting in touch with alumni from our sectors and companies of interest? It's a very good question, and it's a question we get asked a lot. Our preference, because we've talked about coaching be at the heart of what we do, is to support you to be really good at reaching out and getting in touch with alumni yourselves and honing your skills to make that connection. We tackle this on an individual basis. As you can imagine, if you've got 320 MBAs asking you to share your Rolodex, that is quite a challenge. So we do encourage you to be quite self-sufficient about how you do this. In some cases where it's specific or problematic, we try and help, but we want you to be really good networkers.
Yeah, I think that's really important to underline that, Joy, because if we broker the connection on your behalf, it's not really your network, it's still our network. And then there's just a problem of scale. So I can talk with 100 students in a week. If I was making connections on behalf of all of them, that's all I'd ever be doing. And I would quickly exhaust all of the people in my network, and they'd never help any students again in the future. So, you know, as Joy says, we will step in when there's a case for it, but don't automatically assume that our job is to make connections on your behalf. It's much better to go out there and make those connections through your own activity. Okay, I've got another one. Peer-to-peer CV section on Oscar, different CV than for the CV book, any set format. I would use the same format. The thing with the CV book is if everything is in the same format, it's all consistent and it's nice, easy read. So it makes it much easier for whoever is looking at it, whether it's one of your peers or whether it's an employer, to absorb the information. So yeah, I would use the same format. I've had another one come to me directly. Who do you connect with if you're interested in multilateral organizations like the UN? So I would be the best coach to talk to about that. We have plenty of alumni working in those organizations. So as Joy was saying earlier, you can find them using LinkedIn and start approaching them. And yeah, if that's your area of interest, you'll probably end up working with me quite a lot.
And there's a good question about impact space in the UK, Dan, for you. What is or how is the impact space in the UK, particularly for experienced hiring, and the best way to go about it?
So the best way to go about it will be through establishing networks. There's almost no structured hiring in the impact space, you know, depending on how you're defining impact and what kind of organizations you're thinking about, but there's very little. So, you know, you'll need to do a lot of networking. In the UK, we're fairly well developed with our impact investing and our ESG sectors. We're building up a lot of talent in impact measurement. So those kind of things, there's probably a bit of a head start in the UK. And in other sectors, it's sort of needs-based hiring. But again, I'd probably be the person you can talk to about that.
Yeah. Can I just jump in and mention one resource we didn't mention for you, that you have access to VMOC for your CVs. So you have, I think, is it 9 goes to put your CV through VMOC to check for content. And we'd really encourage you to use this, especially before you upload your CVs.
Okay. I've had... Oh, if you're looking to get a job back in your home country, can you still take our help? Yes, we won't necessarily be as well networked or have as much domain knowledge about your home country as we would in the UK or other markets. But as Joy was saying, you know, part of what we do is supporting you with your own process. So, you know, our coaching would still support you with the best strategies to use to find jobs, help you think through your decision making, and, you know, much about the toolkit translates from one location to the other. So there will still be help for people wanting to go back to their home countries. It's something we do every year. Best place to find information about companies and roles that go through a structured hiring program. It's still MBA Exchange. It hasn't changed in the last 5 minutes. That's still the best resource for looking for leadership development programs and structured hiring programs.
think we've gone through all the questions for the moment.
We may have exhausted them all. Final one. How do employers use the CVs in the CV book for the incoming batch? There are a small number of employers who request to see the CV book. They may do that at any time through the year. And they may be because they've got a specific need, or they may just be interested in browsing and see if anyone jumps out at them. It's good practice for you to have your CV in the CV book for that reason, but don't rely on that. The strategy of waiting for someone to pick you out of the CV book is too passive as a strategy, and generally the strategy of waiting for someone to pick you is too passive. So we encourage you to be much more proactive about your career development and your job seeking strategy.
Yeah.
Here's a nice one. Does impact investing fall under finance or impact? It's perhaps something I should have mentioned earlier. So impact investing is owned by the finance careers team. They own the relationships with most of the employers in that sector. But students often come to both me as the impact careers person and the finance team for coaching. And there's no problem at all with that. If you want to work with two coaches at the same time, then that's completely fine, and you can get two different perspectives. So yeah, you would probably be talking to both of us. And it might be similar as well for impact consulting or sustainability consulting. That is officially owned by the consulting team, and they own the relationships with those employers. But often students that want to get into that sector are talking to both me and the consulting coaches. So no problem at all with working with two coaches.
Yeah, and when it comes to kind of looking at our employment outcomes, Hannah really helpfully put up a link to our most recent employment report. And whilst we kind of look at standalone impact roles, as Dan points out, some of them sit in consulting and some of them sit in finance, but we do make sure that Dan and his team get credit. It's very important.
You're very generous about that. Thank you, Joy. Yeah. Do you get more than 10 checks on request if you finish your initial 10 on VMOC? No, the answer is no. We couldn't give you any more than that. It shouldn't take you more than 10 to get a good score on your CV. And if you're struggling with your CV and getting a good score on VMOC for any reason, then book a one-to-one with a careers coach and we can give you some manual feedback on the CV. VMOC's a really good tool and we really encourage you to use it, but it's not perfect. So sometimes it doesn't understand if you have a slightly out of order CV because of the order you've had experiences in, or if you want to present something in a slightly different way. So don't be shy about getting in touch with a careers coach to help with the CV as well. Okay, we've got about 8 minutes left. I think we've answered a fair number of questions. Let's move on a little bit. So
great. Do you want to take this bit, Dan?
I can. The clock is ticking. You can see days are counting down. You're going to be with us before you know it. So first thing is, I strongly encourage you to make use of the time you have between now and starting the MBA. The better prepared you are, the more developed your thinking is before you land with it and start the program, then the better for you. And here are some of the things you can do before you start. So you're already on this welcome webinar. We've got the sector webinars coming up as well. So that's a great use of your time. And we've already mentioned we've got this pre-arrival work, this asynchronous work available on Canvas for you. We strongly encourage you to work through that. And because so much hiring is done through relationships, because advocates and referrals are so important in the hiring process, and because gathering the information from practitioners in your sector is what really helps you make good career decisions. It helps you decide what's achievable, what are good entry points for you, and it's that information that really helps you position yourself as a strong candidate. So establishing relationships and starting to talk with people in your target sector and start building up those conversations is really, really important. And, hopefully you're able to start making some choices. The more choices you make earlier, the earlier you can focus and the greater your chances of success. So attend the welcome webinars, complete the pre-arrival work, start your networking activity right away. And that doesn't just mean connecting with people on LinkedIn, it means approaching them and talking to them as well. And then hopefully through all of that activity, you'll be able to start making some early career choices.